There are founders who are wildly successful financially,
Yeah.
but they feel disconnected. They feel a bit disembodied. They feel like what they've done is inconsistent with what they wanted. They feel um, like what they're building is maybe not what they had set up to build. Right? It's become something
Yeah.
else, not what they had maybe dreamed of. Right? And so what I find is that oftentimes one of the ways to kind of establish some protection and guardrail around that initial fire and that initial idea to ensure that it's championed in the long term is to be surrounded by people who are not just trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, but people who believe in what you believe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tap Into Wisdom. Today, we are kicking things off with someone who lives at the intersection of clarity and growth. I'm joined by Justin Bronson, founder of Citizen and Company, a creative, brand-led marketing firm that has built a strong reputation for helping modern business sharpen who they are, how they show up, and how they scale without chasing every shiny tactic. Justin, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Kwame.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry now for about 15, 16 years, straight out of college. And I started initially on the media side. So not as much in strategy like I am now, but tactically and
Uh,
execution. And I was in-house in traditional media environments for a number of years before I moved into the agency space and worked with a creative branding studio and digital marketing firm. I was in account management, moved into planning, and then it's funny, like nobody really sets out to go into strategy because there's no like actual career track for it or curriculum for it within school. Where design development is a clear pathway for how to move into that, right? But
yeah,
strategy just tends to attract the people who tend to be um, our thinking tends to be in infancy stages of the creative process, right?
yeah,
And so for me, I found myself often in environments with clients where we were ready to execute a rollout for a campaign. And I was kind of in this place of internal conflict thinking we're not ready for that yet because there's still work to do to prepare.
yeah,
Um, so it was a really natural segue into strategy for me. And I started my own firm about, gosh, I guess it was November of 2017. So I've been at it for a little over 8 years now.
yeah,
And my focus really is on identity systems and messaging, especially because so much of what I find within the majority of most industry categories, regardless of the size of the business, design systems and visual identity systems are pretty well locked up, right?
yeah,
They know how they look, they know how they use images, they know how they use art, they know what their design styles and typeface and all of the different design elements that are used in campaigns. They have those things dialed in, but then when it comes time to say something, they struggle to put those words together.
well,
Right, and
yeah,
for the most part, when they put those words together, it's reacting to whatever's happening in front of them. It's not as thoughtful or as planned out as it should be. So, messaging architecture, messaging frameworks, how that informs and influences copy, and then how we take that copy and how we kind of move it throughout the entire brand ecosystem. So every time the brand speaks, it's speaking to the same idea, it's communicating the same value, and it's
wow,
cultivating familiarity in people because familiarity is at the base of trust.
wow, wow. How did you get into this role? Did you need a degree or education for such skill?
Yeah, and like I said before, there's really no specific career track for it. Like when you go to
Oh,
school for like my degree's in marketing, right?
yeah,
Um, and for the most part, the curriculum is pretty generalized,
yeah,
right? They want you to have a basic understanding of principles from accounting, economics, organizational behavior, international business, business administration, marketing methodologies, campaign planning, all these different things that you're taught within that kind of academic context.
mhm,
They are relevant to the work of a strategist, but um, they're not strategy as a discipline itself. Where strategy really, um, what I view it as mostly is strategy is It's about insights, because
Yeah.
any good strategy is going to be rooted in a clear, compelling insight.
Mm-hmm.
And an insight is something that's been illuminated from your interactions with customers that helps you understand the problem that they're facing in a new
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because there's so many different ways, usually, right, that a problem can be solved,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Most problems have multiple solutions. But in the words of Julian Cole, who's a thought leader within strategy, he says that strategy is simply determining which solution is best.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are multiple, which one's the best? And best is a fluid
Wow.
term, right? We have to be mindful of what we're trying to accomplish, the progress we're trying to make, who we're trying to build a brand for, things like
Yeah.
that. But it's finding the right solution to address really a properly defined problem.
Oh, okay. Wow. Wow, very insightful. So you found Citizen and Company around this
Mhm.
mission of building brands for the good of society. That's not a
Yeah,
language I hear everywhere in the brand strategy world.
yeah,
When
yeah.
the vision really crystallized for you, and what were you seeing in the market that made you think this needed to exist?
Yeah, so the reason I frame my specific value proposition that way is because I do believe that there is still room to grow in
Yeah.
in the business world, in a capitalist economy, right? And
Yeah.
within the very nature of capitalism is about growth,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Growth sometimes at all costs, right? And I understand in principle the value of growth, and even a healthy view of wanting to grow just as a person. It's a basic aspect of human function, right? We want to
Yeah.
grow, we want to improve, we want to outperform the previous best version of ourselves, right? So we
Yeah.
take that kind of human thinking into a workspace, into a corporate space, into a brand space, and those principles, we tend to embody those same principles in that environment. So I'm not critical of ambitions for growth, but it's fascinating. Delta Airlines just released information about how, for the first time ever in their history, more of their revenue came from first class than it did from economy.
Mm.
So that should tell us something about the nature of our collective overall economy
Wow.
globally,
Yeah.
not just where I am in the US, but across the world, right?
Mhm.
And so there's conversations even now in my country about the health of the economy, and it's the healthiest it's ever been. And the question I would ask is, okay, for who?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't disagree. The economy is thriving, but it's thriving for specific people.
Yeah.
It's
True.
not thriving for everybody. So for
No.
me, um, I'm a big believer in basic human principles of dignity, right? Decency, and in a sense, like the collective welfare, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe that a person's excess should come at the suffering of another person.
No.
And what we know about resources through the lens of capitalism, and in a sense, like with capitalist economic theory, you have four factors of production that essentially are the cornerstones of the capitalist model, right? And I'm not going to get into that because it's not necessarily super relevant to this conversation. But what we know in any economic model is that resources are not infinite.
Yeah.
They're finite by their very nature. So if
Yes.
resources are finite, and resources are trying to be exchanged among people,
Yeah.
for there to be excess of resources among the few, it depends on the lack of resources for the many.
Hmm.
So for me,
Yeah.
I want to build not just businesses, but I want to help build brands and come alongside other people who are trying to build businesses and to build brands where they just want to strike a healthier balance globally between all people that are on the planet, right?
Hmm.
All
Yeah.
businesses, so that one person's success doesn't have to come at the suffering of another person.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. That's a really brilliant insight for your team building brands for good of society. In our last conversation, you made this point that founders can hit product market fit, achieve massive user adoption, and significant market share and all these metrics that everyone is obsessed about, but still not be fulfilled by what they've built or proud of who they built it with. That's
Right.
an unconventional perspective taking,
Sure.
or that's so metrics driven. What made you realize that early founder struggles are really rooted in alignment rather than execution?
Yeah. So there's a there's a social scientist here in the States named Dr. Arthur C. Brooks, and he's a professor, an author, a speaker, and a scientist. And
Mm-hmm.
he's been quoted for saying that successful people aren't happy, happy people are successful. And what he's doing, he's essentially framing the data that he's collected throughout his career to understand that when people pursue success and they are all out in that pursuit for success, that path is not a guarantee to the experience of fulfillment and
Mm.
contentment and happiness,
Wow.
right? But the people who pursue contentment and happiness, they they do experience, the vast majority of them, success,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
But when your pursuit is that that contentment and that fulfillment within your life and whatever sources you pull from to find it, right? How you
Mhm.
define success then becomes rooted in metrics beyond the financial, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be swimming in cash to view that your life has been a success and it's been
Mhm.
worth it and that you've found fulfillment within it.
Wow.
Um, and so what you do get within especially the startup culture is you have people who I do believe genuinely they start with big ambition and beautiful ambition, right? They have
Yeah.
really powerful ideas that they care about deeply,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes in the pursuit of realizing those ideas in the real world, they're often asked during the journey to compromise on the ambition for other things,
Mm.
right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that everybody does. But the fact is, along that path, there will be things that will come against the ideals and the values that are kind of informing and guiding those early days and those early stages for them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so what you do find is you find that there are founders who are wildly successful financially,
Yeah.
but they feel disconnected. They feel a bit disembodied. They feel like what they've done is inconsistent with what they wanted. They feel um, like what they're building is maybe not what they had set up to build. Right? It's become something
Yeah.
else, not what they had maybe dreamed of. Right? And so what I find is that oftentimes one of the ways to kind of establish some protection and guardrail around that initial fire and that initial idea to ensure that it's championed in the long term is to be surrounded by people who are not just trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, but people who believe in what you believe.
Mm.
Because there's a big
Yeah.
difference between those two things, right? You can
Oh.
bring somebody on your team that has technical excellence in
Yeah.
whatever capability they're being hired for, right? But are
Yeah.
they unshakable in the belief that is your core conviction? Is it also theirs, right?
Yeah.
If it is, that's what unites you, right?
Oh. Yeah.
If if they don't, at some point, tension will ask for that conviction to be tested, right?
Yeah.
And it may not endure. So,
Uh-huh. Well, with that being said, I remembered a case study that I read on Google about Zenefits when they hit about 4.5 billion net worth. And one day they had an infamous internal email that stated, "Do not use the steroids to smoke, drink, eat, or have sex." So
uh,
basically, the employees were caught drinking and using the office steroids as loudness and smoking and doing all kinds of unfilthy things in the workplace. So the leadership later admitted that the company were growing so fast as a startup, and because of that, the culture started stretching beyond the founder's control. So they laid off a lot of employees, about 430 to 500 employees. They hired all of them. So in your words, what control should a founder install early so that culture and alignment doesn't rot under growth pressure?
Yeah, so I tell my clients that culture is always a combination of what you build and what you allow. And um, you may not always be actively cognitively aware of the allowances that you're creating within the spaces that you lead, you know?
Yeah.
So it takes concerted effort, and it takes a significant amount of work to map out that initial, um, I guess, canvas of whatever your organizational standards are. They're going to be guiding principles for the cultural space. And then with that too, like I was saying before, when you bring people on your team, the goal should be to bring people on team who not only can do the job, but believe in why it's being done.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a vast difference between those two things. And what we see actually every July, every 2 years, Gallup puts out an employee engagement report called State of the Workforce. And there's two reports within it. There's the State of the American Workforce and State of the Global Workforce. And regardless of which report you're looking at, what we know is that employee disengagement is really high. And they're gauging every category,
Yeah.
not every business, but the sample that they pull from is so significant that the statistical confidence of the data is undeniable, right?
Wow.
And they pull from qualitative and quantitative sources, right? So that qualitatively they can glean insights from the data, but then quantitatively they can see how far those insights scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so consistently what they see is that even still, the people who care about the work they're doing, really care about it and believe in it, that hovers right around 33% of people
Wow.
that are employed.
Yeah.
So what that means is that 67% of people on average, all across the world, they don't really care about the work they're doing.
Oh,
And so what that means is that creates cultural allowances for other things that are inconsistent with the cultural ethos to happen. Because when people really care about what they're doing, they give more to it. They always do. Like, if I think about the things in my life that I care the most about, I give so much to those things and to those people. And I'm sure you're the same, because we all have that in common. The things, the people, the ideas that we care so deeply about, they get the best of our effort and the best of our attention.
Yeah.
Right? That's true for everybody. It's just for every person, what they care about is just different from person to person, right? And so because disengagement is so high, what we know is that there's a financial cost to disengagement, right? Profitability is less, sales volume is less, employee absences are higher, employee turnover is higher. For companies that are either shipping or drop shipping something, from an inventory perspective, there's far more inventory shrinkage. So like loss or damage with inventory, when it's within a disengaged workforce compared to an engaged workforce. So every metric that matters financially, both on the revenue generation and the cost mitigation side of the balance sheet, is improved significantly when people care about what they're doing, right? And that's not surprising. That makes sense to us, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, when companies are building teams, they're just trying to make sure, can you do the job you're being hired for? And that's necessary. You want to bring in people who are capable, right? And then you develop and you sharpen their skills to enhance the efficiency of their capabilities while they're under your leadership. But at the same time, you should be also hiring those people through the lens of shared belief. So not only can you do the job, but do you believe in why we're doing it? Because if not, they will cost you more.
Yeah, true.
Their contributions will be more expensive.
Yeah, true. So using Zenefits as a cautionary tale, what are some belief check you'd require before you let someone into the core team?
Yeah, so I have a pretty systematized process for at least that I build for my clients in terms of how um, new personnel are screened and interviewed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not quick. It's 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 not slow, but it's thorough and it's thoughtful, and because of that, it just takes multiple phases of like initial evaluation, right? And it's one of those things where no system really is perfect, so it can't account for, say, people who are applying to a role and maybe they present um, a version of themselves that maybe isn't entirely true.
Yeah.
Or maybe that applicant presents a version of themselves where they are, I don't know, agreeable, but maybe not necessarily honest, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay, because how you qualify someone for a capability and a cultural fit within the organization, you don't just do it once and leave it there, right? You constantly requalify through the life cycle of that person's, employment on the team. So
Yeah.
that happens within the review cycle, right? And the review cycle, I believe, should happen at a minimum every few months. So quarterly at the minimum, um, monthly if you can handle it. But even with that, like there should be, I build out like culture calendars with my clients where we have such a high frequency of touch points
Mm-hmm.
between people on teams and people who are leading teams, so that there's always opportunity for that connection and for the relational equity to build, but also for the interactions to kind of produce new insights for those who are leading to better understand how they can help their people.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, it's not just about the employees being highly engaged, but it's also about cultivating better leadership within the people who are asked to lead.
Mm.
And leadership is not self-preservation. So if a person who's in a leadership role, if their focus is really just on preserving their own status and they don't treat the people that work for them with any dignity, the
Mm.
person's not a leader. They just aren't, right?
Yeah.
They're what they're doing is inconsistent with what leadership requires. Um, so everybody really is accountable to the same kind of cultural standard, right? But you screen for that cultural alignment very heavy, very early on, and then you just embody a rhythm where you constantly go back to that rescreening and you try to
Yeah.
understand how are people growing in their adoption of this cultural ethos, and also
Oh,
how are they growing in the sharpening of their capabilities and their skills, right? Because we want them to get better at the work, but we
yeah.
also want them to believe more deeply in why we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. What you said really speaks to me as well, because I also believe that brand building is also about building belief. And most of the time, the biggest brands in the world or don't sell stuffs anymore. They sell ideas. They sell
Yeah, exactly.
experience for their people to
Yeah.
engage in their products. And the products that they design are also just a vehicle for advancing that idea into the world.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
let's say I am a founder and I come to you and I am thinking about brand strategy as visual identity or messaging. How do you help me or anyone into that shift to thinking about what idea they are actually selling?
Right. Well, and the thing is people usually know what the idea is that
Mm-hmm.
inspired the product development phase, right?
Yeah.
People usually bring the idea to the work before the work gets started, right? They may not have clarity on how they articulate the idea. Usually that's the issue, but the idea exists, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit more ambiguous, it's a bit more felt. Um, and it's just kind of it's the undercurrent for the work. It's the undercurrent for the effort and the
Yeah.
sacrifice and all the energy that they put in to that initial build or that initial founding. But they may not be able to articulate succinctly or clearly so that others can understand what
Yeah.
the idea is that's driving and guiding the work. So
Mm.
for the most part, what I do is I just come in and I just kind of facilitate um, workshops and strategic sessions that help articulate what that guiding idea is, and then build
Wow.
out the entire messaging architecture from there. So,
I
and you're
I
right. The biggest brands in their categories, they don't, they're not like their priority really isn't on what they sell. It's on the idea that the stuff like supports, right? So where I am in the world, Nike headquarters is also in the Pacific Northwest. It's in Portland. And Nike obviously makes and sells shoes. They have other footwear, they have other apparel, performance
Mhm.
athletic apparel, right? And
Yeah.
then casual athletic apparel, whatever. Um, but they make whatever they need to as
Mhm.
long as it supports their guiding idea,
Wow.
right? And their guiding idea is that if you have a body, you are an athlete.
Mm.
That's what they believe.
Wow.
Regardless of the shape of the body, the health of the body, the whatever. And you
Yeah.
can see it in their creative over the years. They'll have creative that shows Jordan or
Mm.
Steph Curry or Shohei Ohtani, like
Yeah.
athletes at the top of their game, but then they'll also show creative of everyday people,
Wow.
right? Who
Yeah.
are working to become the best possible version of themselves, right?
Yeah.
In fitness and athletics, in health, whatever it is. Um, and so they believe if you have a body, regardless of the state of your body, if you have one, you are an athlete,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so whatever they make for that idea for those people.
Wow.
And what they make at that point, that's what's really actually kind of beautiful about being driven by an idea, because then the potential opportunities in the product suite expands exponentially, right?
Yeah.
Nike doesn't just have to make shoes and apparel, and they
Mm.
don't. They
No.
make a lot of different things. And it's because their qualifier for whether a product is worth development is if it supports that idea.
Wow.
And usually, just what I find is that founders, they have an idea that inspires them to start, but then once they start, they get caught up in the product, right? And it's not that they lose sight of the idea, but oftentimes it's just a matter of articulation. They don't know how to communicate it in a way where others can feel it the way they do,
Yeah.
right? Because being asked what your guiding idea is, and then to ramble for 20 minutes incoherently while you throw ideas together to try to figure it out, that doesn't help the other person understand, right? You have to be able to communicate it succinctly, clearly, and in a way that's compelling to the other person when they hear it because you knew it so well, right? You can
Wow.
only teach what you know. And if you don't know it like without flaw, you won't be able to help others understand it in
Right.
that same way.
Right. Right. Let's talk a bit about your brand book, which I know is your
Sure.
trademark deliverable.
Yeah.
So, given everything we've discussed about belief and alignment, I'm guessing this goes way beyond. Here is your logo. Here is a color palette. Here is your product and all sort of stuff. So, if the goal is to help a brand advance an idea into the world, what are you actually codifying in that brand books
Mhm.
that helps them to do that consistently?
Yeah, so the brand book codifies messaging as it relates to the brand. Product messaging, what I find, it will be what it needs to be as the product gets developed and released,
Uh-huh.
right? So, for example, if I were to write something like this for Nike, they don't need me to write product language for, I don't know, the Air Force Ones.
Yeah.
They don't need it. For the most part, product language is going to be material specs, product dimensions, size information, shipping
Yeah.
data, stuff that it would be a waste of their resources to ask me to write that down for them because it is what it is as the product is developed and released, right? That information is fixed to the product as the product emerges within the brand's life. Um, but brand messaging should be adjacent to and a part of all of that, right? Because not all messages that go out into the world where the brand is communicating with its consumers,
Uh-huh.
not every single message is a product message, and not every single message is a brand message. And sometimes they're done in tandem, right? So you have to have that language ready to deploy when the time comes to deploy it.
Yeah.
Because the biggest brands in the world, they're not reacting to like the moments that are happening. They're thinking deeply about them, but they've also been planning in advance. What are the things that we're just going to be actively speaking to because they're important to us,
Yeah.
right? And so Nike has done that in a variety of ways, not only through product, not only through ideas of human performance and potential and possibility, but also in the cultural moments that are meaningful to them and the people that are in their communities, right?
Yeah.
If it's a campaign that they did with, um, Colin Kaepernick, right? A number of years ago,
Yeah.
and recognizing that footwear and athletics, that there is a big, um, I guess, cultural identity tied to footwear that's beyond just the functional purpose of a shoe, but
Uh,
tied to style, tied to fashion, all of these things that are really meaningful within the lives of people. Um, that Nike recognizes, okay, it's important to you, it's important to us. And so they meet their consumers in those cultural moments as well.
uh,
So, but to do that, you have to know how to show up and speak when the time comes. It doesn't happen randomly and it doesn't happen out of nowhere. Usually you're able to communicate well in those moments when you're communicating from a place of fluency,
yeah.
right? Because it's something you've been talking about for a while.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why I'm able to communicate what I have without really having to pause or to think, without having to stammer or to fill the space between my words with or anything like that, is because I talk about this so much that I'm fluent
Yeah.
in it. It's so
Yeah.
familiar to me that it's easy to share with somebody else because I'm always
Yeah.
talking about it, but I'm also always thinking about it. Right. And Nike, they
Yeah.
have things in their creative team, within their leadership, things that they are always thinking about. So when it
Mm-hmm.
comes time for them to speak, it's not hard because now they're just releasing ideas that they've been thinking about anyways. Right. And
Yeah.
that's true for the majority of brands that are leading their categories. Right. And that's part of what helps them lead those categories because they're also leading important cultural conversations at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Justin, for your
Yeah.
insight. Thank you. Our audience will surely profit from it. So, guys, if you want to learn more about Justin's work, check out Citizen and Company. I'll drop his links in the description below. And before we go, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, we are here to learn and grow as a community. So keep on learning and keep on growing and keep on to tap into wisdom. Thank you very much and see you in the next episode.